2, 3, testing. Testing. A quorum having been reached, the meeting is called to order. The first item of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance to a flag, led today by Maeve Nugent of the U.S. Girl Scouts, and she's flanked by a color guard of Jeannie Fiore, Esther Johnson, and Anna Manzano from the American Legion Auxiliary. Thank you, Maeve. Thank you, Maeve. So every year, I award a Citizen of the Year award. And we have a plaque that will sit out in the hallway there with 31 such awards over the years. What a wonderful array of citizens we have in this town. And this year's recipient is no exception. She is a very unique person with a rare personality who just, everything she touches just almost has magic run off on it, walk off on it, something. And she actually worked here in the town hall for a number of years. And while she was here, it was easiest to do business, and everything was done with a light heart, and it was a delight. But her job didn't stop when the time clock clicked off. She actually was very involved in many things in the town. I can remember well, she was very, very involved in the Memorial Day Parade, especially the year that we switched the direction in which we ran it. She put a tremendous amount of work in and made things happen that we didn't think could happen. She also was instrumental in reinstituting the Humpernickel race and worked very hard to get that going. This year's recipient of the Citizen Year Award, long deserved, is Bobby Joe Blair. I don't think she's here. Right. Thank you very much. So the Board of Selectmen will announce the Charles Kelly Scholarship Award.
Scholarship Award for 2023. The Charles Kelly Scholarship is awarded every year to a Nahant resident who is accepted to a 2- or 4-year accredited college. The applicants are asked to write a short essay on what community services mean to them. Community service was instilled in this year's recipient at a very young age, as her parents taught her that community service is anywhere you want it to be, whether it is in town or not. She has been a Girl Scout since she's at the age of 5 and has participated in clothing, food, and toy drives and donated her time to the local food kitchens. She also is a volunteer of the Volvers soccer program, which pairs special needs children with a high school student. They teach the children the rules of the game and soccer skills, but most importantly, they create a bond that truly impacts both of their lives. She has also enjoyed volunteering locally with the PTO Christmas tree sales, Junior Garden Club, and many fundraisers throughout the year. I just want to let you know that we read these essays anonymously. We don't know who they are, and 3 members of the board vote on this. So without further ado, we are happy to announce that this year's recipient for the Charles Kelly Scholarship is Maya Raphael. Maya is a graduate of Swampscott High School and will be attending Bryant College in the fall.
Thank you. We also have a number of scholarships to be presented by the American Legion. And so we have some wonderful representatives of the Legion that are here to award those scholarships, but they have to come up and do it. Please. There he is.
Thank you, Dave. Can I get Dana Sheehan, Jeannie Fiore, and Molly Conlon to join me with this activity? Thank you all for being here. We are blessed to have some outstanding students that come up through Nahant and move on in life. These are for the students who will be leaving high school and moving on to their colleges and universities. The American Legion Auxiliary has taken the initiative to support these students with scholarships. They're challenged to write an essay. This year's essay was to be referring back to JFK's words, ask not what you can do for your country, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. It's one or the other. Anyway, these kids sat down and thought about what it meant. And I think we all think about what it means to be a citizen. So as individuals, we'd live in tribes, we'd live in groups, we'd quarrel and fight with adjacent small groups. As citizens, we band together and we can accomplish great things, whether it's the space program, whether it's town government, whether it's a secure place to live, our police department, our fire department, our military, the people who keep us safe. By having organizations and civilizations where we are able, as citizens, to create this infrastructure, it allows us to prevail, it allows us to be safe, and it allows us to have future generations of human beings who move on. That's what it is to be a citizen. And these are indeed outstanding citizens that have been able to capture this general thought as spark-plugged by John Fitzgerald Kennedy's words. So I'm going to ask Jeannie Fiore to make her presentation and then continue on.
So the American Legion Auxiliary is very happy to award Mia Alexis Shanna the award for an outstanding essay and community service and being a great citizen. And I do recall during the Wall That Heals assembly being very nervous watching Mia go up with panels in her hands and very bravely in flip-flops. It was such a memory, but that's just one of her little or major accomplishments is to the community. Thank you, Mia. I also want to say that she is going to Curry College and will be studying nursing, which we so desperately need.
Next is Anna Manzano. Everyone knows Anna.
As part of the American Legion, we had 2 scholarships to present this year, and it was very tough making decisions on them. But We had a number of candidates that did a very excellent job in the essay. So we would like to present those. The first one goes to Colby Godwin, who is Colby will be studying engineering, and I'm sure he has a great future.
And Dana Sheehan.
Thank you. You know, as a committee, the American Legion and the Auxiliary, we got together, it was our scholarship committee, and we had to evaluate all the applications and come up with two. But we failed. We could not eliminate anybody. We only got 3 applications. We decided to fund them all as scholarships, and it was a great experience to not eliminate anybody and to fund them all. So next year, make sure, you know, you guys put your applications in, you might get funded. So this scholarship goes to Ethan Angersbach.
Congratulations to all our scholarship recipients. Godspeed, good luck, and we appreciate your efforts, and you're off to a great start. Thank you.
Now to get down a little business, our esteemed town clerk, Diane Savage Dunphy, will read the return of service on the warrant.
On the day written above, which was May 5th, 2023, I have served this warrant by posting attested printed copies thereof at the town hall and such other places the selectmen deem appropriate, but not less than 3 in each precinct at the Nahant Police Station, Nahant Fire Station, Nahant Public Library. Signed by Chief Timothy Furlong, Nahant Police.
Thank you. That means we're legitimate, ladies and gentlemen. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Let me just review who are here who are not town voting citizens. So I've got Tony Barletta, Mark Reich, Alyssa Nieto, Chief Tim Furlong, Jessica Mancini, who is you'll be hearing from very soon. She's the operator of our voting machines. Tony Parentozzi, our supervisor, and that, I think, is it. Is there anyone else here who is not a registered voter? Very good. Very good. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do some practice voting. These voting machines may be a little different than what you've used in the past, and I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Mancini to lead us through just a couple of votes so you can see how to operate the machines. Do you have a mic? You do.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm over here in the corner if anybody's looking for the floating voice. So I'm going to go ahead and take you through a couple voting questions with the hard-hitting information that we need to continue this meeting. But first, I'm going to go over the instructions. The first is that you're going to press 1A to vote yes on questions. You're going to press 2B to vote no. You'll be able to vote once you see the voting slide until the end of the 10-second timer. Going forward, I've added onto the voting slides that little icon in the lower corner that looks like the clicker that you have in your hands. As I said, you'll see a green light on your device to indicate your vote has been received. You're also going to see that your choice is displayed on that teeny little screen that is on your clicker. So I'm going to go ahead and move to some test questions, and we'll give it a try. Okay, so here's our first test question. It's a great day for a town meeting. Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, You can vote now, and now I'm going to start the 10-second timer.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Okay. I told you these are some seriously hard-hitting questions. Our next question. Isn't Mr. Moderator's tie snazzy? Press 1A for yes, or 2B for also yes. It's a bit of a trick question, because it's a really snazzy tie.
Fixed. It's fixed. I like it.
Everybody likes the tie. Amazing.
On the average, it worked out. Not too good. That's great.
And
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
You're unable to see the lights up? Okay. It should.
Maybe we should get him another vote.
It will not stay on. It'll flash, but I can get you another keypad, or I can check that one out if you would like.
Good. Every vote counts. We want to take the time to get this right. Julie, you're all set. Great. All right. We will begin the meeting, and Julie Tarmy will read the annual resolution.
I move that the town adopt the following resolution. Resolved, that the town adopt the following rule governing motions and amendments made during the 2023 annual town meeting. Whereas, without an override, the amount to be raised by taxation, as recommended by the Advisory and Finance Committee, is expected to be $12,358,920 for fiscal year 2024. And whereas Proposition 2.5 makes it unlawful for the town to levy taxes in excess of $12,358,920 for the fiscal year 2024 without a vote to override the limit. Therefore, in order to ensure compliance with the levy limit imposed by Proposition 2.5, the participants of the 2023 annual town meeting shall require that anyone introducing a motion at this meeting which would result in increasing an appropriation above the amount permissible under the levy limit proposed by Proposition 2.5, be obliged to specify the alternative means of funding by giving names of other articles or accounts, excluding the reserve fund, employee benefits, debt service, OPEB trust fund, and stabilization fund, and the amount by which the appropriated or recommended amount for such account or articles must be reduced in order to fund the requested increase.
Seconded by Ms. Warren. Further discussion on the annual resolution? Seeing and hearing none, let's vote. Those in favor, vote yes. Those opposed, vote no. The motion carries by a lot, which is good. Article 1, Mr. Barba.
I move that the following sums are hereby appropriated for the fiscal year 2023 expenses as follows. $4,000 for the treasurer salaries to be transferred from treasurer expenses.
Seconded by Mr. Vanderslice. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor, please vote yes. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 2, Mr. Vanderslice. Now, before Mr. Vanderslice makes his pitch, I would like to have everyone in the room stand up. Please stand up. And please give Mr. Vanderslice a rousing round of applause. It turns out this is Bob Vanderslice's 35th year on the Finance and Advisory Committee. Can you imagine what he has had to do? Fantastic. Fantastic, Bob. Thank you from the bottom of the heart of the town, what you've done.
And so thank you, and thank you to generations of Finance Committee as well.
For sure.
Let's see, Article 2. I move that the sum of $91,461.60 is hereby appropriated for the fiscal year 2023 snow and ice account. To meet this appropriation, transfer from the following fiscal year 2023 accounts: $70,000 from the reserve fund and $21,461.60 from the insurance committee expense account.
Seconded by Mr. McMacken. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor, vote yes. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 3, yes, sir. Didn't work? How do you know you voted against it? Is that what you're saying, Gene? What happened here? All right, hang on a second. She's got one. Here you go. Yeah, anytime anybody else's doesn't work, we want your vote every time. So don't hesitate to let us know. No. Yes, sir. Article 3, Mr. Barba.
I move that this article be indefinitely postponed as there are currently no prior year bills.
You know, we thought about just not even raising it, but I think it's a great testament to our town government that we got through the year without any at all old bills. Mr. Vanderslice. There's no vote. Oh. Okay, anybody against indefinitely postponing? All right. We'll move on to Article 4. Thank you.
Okay, so Article 4. I move that Article 13, Section 5, Subsection B of the bylaws is amended for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023 by replacing the existing section as shown in the report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee on pages 8 and 10. So just a brief word of explanation. This article, Article 4 and Article 5, which follows, are where we establish how much we will pay the various town employees and officials.
By the way, there was a seconded by Ms. Zahara.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot all about that, Dave. And they are actually funded, or we authorize the expending of the funds in the omnibus article, which is coming up later.
Okay, further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye, or by voting yes, excuse me. Regressing here. And those opposed, no. What's up? Okay, yeah. You see the 10-second timer going. The vote on the presently pending motion is got to be voted within that time period. Or the article, the motion carries. Article 6.
5.
Hmm?
5.
5? Okay. Article 5.
So this is Article 5. I move that the salaries of the following elected officials are fixed for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023. Selectmen at the annual salary of $1, constable at the annual salary of $50, assessors at the annual salary of $1, town clerk at the annual salary of $64,417.
Seconded by Mr. Barba. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes, those opposed vote no. Motion carries. Article 6, Ms. Zahora.
Okey-dokey, thank you. This is a long one. Everybody, sit back. I move that the town transfer the sum of $717,935 from free cash, $60,000 from the overlay surplus, and raise and appropriate the following sums of money for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023.
Judy, just before you go, let me just review. Most of folks here have been here many times, so it's kind of tedious, but we will go through many different expenses here, and if there are questions that you have as to any one of those expenses, shout out pass, and we'll note that and go back to it if there's an issue with it. Most of these things there are no issues with regard to, but if you have an issue with it, shout out pass, and then before we go on to the next one, and then we'll note those passes and we'll come back and talk about those to find out what the issues are. All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right. These are all in dollars, so I'll read it that way. So the moderator, general expenses, 60. Selectmen, wages and salaries, 3. General expenses, 169,400. Public health, salaries, wages, 98,046. General expenses, 20,000. Town administrator, salary and wages, 247,705. ADA coordinator, 500. General expenses, 42,650. Capital outlay, 2,000. of which $2,000 is funded from free cash. Finance Committee, general expenses, $10,175. Town accountant, salaries and wages, $182,338. General expenses, $9,717. Assessors, salaries and wages, $111,516. General expenses, $61,575. Treasurer collector, salaries and wages, $134,924. General expenses, $64,573. Capital outlay, $1,400, of which $1,400 is funded from free cash. Town council, annual fee, $75,000. Town hall, salaries and wages, $333,254. Did I say that? $33,254, salaries and wages. General expenses, $59,410. Capital outlay, $15,000, of which $15,000 is funded from free cash. Data processing, salaries and wages and general expenses, $213,000. Town clerk, salaries and wages, $73,705. General expenses, $15,800. Capital outlay, $1,400, of which $1,400 is funded from free cash. Election registration, salary, wages, general expenses, $17,060. Conservation Commission, general expenses, $1,260. Planning Board, general expenses, $2,650. Zoning Board of Appeals, general expenses, $2,900. Police Department, salaries and wages, $1,468,966. General expenses, $200,104. Capital outlay, $80,000, of which $80,000 is funded from free cash. Fire Department, salaries and wages, $1,090,163. General expenses, $202,137. Capital outlay, $25,000, of which $25,000 is funded from free cash. Inspection Services Department, salaries, wages, and general expenses, $56,492. Building inspection, salaries and wages, $19,242. General expenses, $7,700. Plumbing, gas inspections, salaries and wages, $7,363. General expenses, $950. Wiring inspections, salaries and wages, $7,363. General expenses, $950. I try not to make up the numbers as I go. Emergency management, salaries and wages, $17,600. General expenses, $7,000. Capital outlay, $15,000, of which $15,000 is funded from free cash. Animal control, salaries and wages, $10,646. General expenses, $4,003. Parking clerk, salaries and wages, $6,750. General expenses, $14,985. Harbor master, salaries and wages, $3,546. General expenses, $9,843. Wharf fingers, salaries and wages, $2,073. General expenses, $3,127. School department, salaries, wages, and general expenses, $4,072,461. Transportation, $285,488. Debt service, $329,600. Essex North Shore Agricultural and Technical School Assessment, $194,226, of which $55,149 is funded from free cash. Public Works Department includes Public Works Administration, Highway and Streets, Beaches and Parks, Cemetery, and Overhead. Salary and wages, $248,741. General expenses, $254,823. Capital outlay, $97,750. Debt service, $71,312, of which $169,062 is funded from free cash. Public Works, Snow and Ice, $30,000. Council on Aging, salary and wages, $52,795. General expenses, $16,756. Veterans Agent, salaries and wages, $8,789. General expenses, $33,550. Library, salaries and wages, $191,297. General expenses, $71,316. Recreation, general, salaries, wages, general expenses, excuse me, $3,296. Recreation, sailing, wages and salary, wages, general expenses, $6,099. Recreation, tennis, salaries, wages, and general expenses, $3,011. Memorial Day Committee, general expenses, $8,000. Fourth of July Committee, general expenses, $10,000. Beautification Committee, general expenses, $2,150. General debt service, principal and interest, $277,744, of which $353,924 funded from free cash and $60,000 is funded from overlay surplus. Unemployment compensation, life insurance, health insurance, Medicare tax, Essex Regional Retirement Board, pension and annuity expenses, $2,144,305. Insurance Committee, general expenses, $331,277. Retirement account, $50,000. Reserve fund, general reserve, $200,000. Utility reserve, $25,000.
Seconded by Ms. Tarman. Thank you. Judith, fantastic job of reading that. It's a mouthful for sure. Further discussion, we had no passes that I heard. Do we have further discussion on the motion?
But I believe that it should have been $48,547.91. At the very beginning, sorry, when you were reading where money was coming from, you did mention overlay. Correct. We only released, the Board of Assessors released $48,547.91. I said $48,547.91.
Okay. Instead of 60,000.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Further corrections or comments? Yes. We have a second going here. It's just in the introduction, so I think, yeah, accept it or not.
Point of order, so that amends the current motion?
No, actually, the figure that was quoted, I believe, is just an introductory statement as to where the general money was coming from. So I don't know that the change in the amount.
How about this? So I stand corrected and we accept the amendment. I can read that, the first motion over again, if that makes that clearer. So let me restate my motion without reading all the way through. But I move that the town transfer the sum of $717,935 for free cash, no, that's not right, still, $48,547.91 from the overlay surplus, and raise and appropriate the following sums for money for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023, of which I had read just previously.
So I don't believe it, I don't think it affects any of the amount that's going to be, that's requested to be raised.
Okay?
We will wait with bated breath to hear from our town administrator and if things of some sort.
Good morning, sorry for the wait. When Ms. Zahora read the general debt service number, principal and interest, $277,744. She then stated, of which $353,924 funded from free cash and $60,000 funded from overlay surplus. That was an error on our part, and it's the entirety, $277,744, will be funded from free cash.
I think it's clarified on the record. So Article 7, Mr. McMacken. Oh, we got to vote on it. I thought things were going too easy. You know, that's the way it is. So I didn't see any passes other than that, and I think we've clarified all of those. So those in favor of the motion, please signify by voting yes, and those opposed, voting no. Excellent. The motion carries. Mr. McMacken, sorry.
Motion 7, Water and Sewer Enterprise. We need a majority vote only on this. I move that the following sums are appropriated for the operation of the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023. That would be salaries at the number of $447,084. Expenses, $1,235,017. Capital outlay, $70,000 even. Debt, $1,645,498. Emergency reserve uncollectible, holding at $40,350 for a total of $3,437,949 US dollars, and that 1.994803 is to be funded from the Water and Sewer Department receipts for said purpose. $320,000 is to be appropriated from the Water and Sewer retained earnings, and $1,365,498 in water and sewer debt costs is to be raised through property taxes, less $242,352 in indirect costs funded from the Water and Sewer Department receipts to be transferred to the general fund.
Seconded by Mr. Barba. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote by saying yes. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 8, Ms. Warren.
Water and sewer equipment and paving. I move that the sum of $50,000 is hereby appropriated from retained earnings in the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund for paving, including all costs incidental or related thereto.
Seconded by Ms. Zahora. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor signify by voting yes. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 9, Mr. McMacken.
Article 9, Rubbish Enterprise. I move that the following sums be appropriated for the operation of the Rubbish Enterprise Fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023. Salaries, $64,621. Expenses, $545,030 for a total of $609,651, and that the $609,651 is to be funded from the rubbish department receipts for said purposes.
Seconded by Mr. Vanderslice. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor signify by voting yes. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 10, Ms. Zahora.
Significantly shorter. I move that the sum of $30,000 is hereby appropriated from retained earnings in the Rubbish Enterprise Fund for the costs associated with the maintenance of the compost area, including all costs incidental or related thereto.
Seconded by Mr. McMacken. Further discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 11, Ms. Darmy.
I move that the town accept Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53D, thereby reauthorizing Parks and Recreation revolving accounts for general recreation, basketball, sailing, tennis, 4th of July, tot lots, playground equipment, and the Youth Commission.
Seconded by Mr. Barba. Further discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 12, Ms. Zahora.
I move that the town fix the maximum amount that may be spent during fiscal year 2024 for the revolving funds established in the town bylaws for certain departments, boards, committees, agencies, or officers in accordance with General Law, Section 44, subsection 53E, 1.5 as follows. Revolving fund. And revolving fund, Council on Aging, the spending limit, $20,000. Cemetery, $20,000. Board of Appeals, $10,000. Conservation Commission, $20,000.
Seconded by Ms. Tarmy. Further discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 13, again, Ms. Zahora.
I move that the sum of $25,000 is hereby appropriated to the other post-employment benefits liability trust fund, and this appropriation is funded from free cash.
Seconded by Ms. Warren. Further discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 14, Mr. Barba.
I move that the sum of $200,000 is hereby appropriated to the stabilization fund and that this appropriation is funded from free cash.
Seconded by Ms. Zahora. Further discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes. Those opposed, no. The Motion carries. Article 15, Mr. McMacken.
Article 15. I move that the sum of $100,000 is hereby appropriated for paving throughout town, including the payment of all incidental and related costs, in that to meet this appropriation, the town treasurer, with the approval of the selectmen, is authorized to borrow the sum of $100,000 under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7.8, or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore.
Seconded by Ms. Warren. Further discussion on that motion? This is a borrowing motion, so we need a two-thirds majority, but as I often say, unanimous includes two-thirds, so let's see what we can do. Those in favor of the motion, vote yes. Those opposed, no. So the vote was 124 in favor, 6 opposed. It passes two-thirds majority with aplomb. All right, Article 16. Mr. Barber.
I move that the sum of $50,000 is hereby appropriated for the renovation of the Council on Aging kitchen, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, and that this appropriation is funded from free cash. Just a quick note on this. I like to say at some point I'm going to get old and be eating downstairs in the Council on Aging, so I urge that you support this.
You're still looking pretty good, I guess. Anyway, that was seconded by Mr. Vanderslice. Further discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, if you're in favor, vote yes. If you're opposed, vote no. Motion carries. By the way, I had a delightful breakfast of 2 hot dogs downstairs in the facility, even as it is now, and they're still doing business if anybody gets a sudden urge. So, Article 17, Mr. Vanderslice.
I move that the sum of $724.50 is hereby appropriated for the purpose of implementing the Transportation Infrastructure Enhancement Fund, and that this appropriation is funded from the revenue transferred by the Commonwealth's Transportation Network Company Division to the town in fiscal year 2023.
Seconded by Ms. Tarmy. Bob has assured us that this will not be on next year's agenda, but this last $724.50 will be assimilated into the town's coffers anyway. Those in favor, seeing no further vote or comment on the motion, those in favor, please vote yes. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Article 18, Ms. Warren.
Sewer and Department of Public Works capital. I move that the sum of $150,000 is hereby appropriated to purchase 2 dump trucks, including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, and that this appropriation is funded from water and sewer retained earnings.
Seconded by Mr. Barba. Further discussion? Yes, sir.
Instead, 2 Summer Street. General question, what's the expected life of the 2 trucks? 5, 10 years?
Hey, Brennan, what was the question?
What's the expected life of the 2 trucks? like 5 years, 10 years, that the town would be able to get use out of them?
Well, our typical fleet schedule, we try to maintain all of our vehicles at least 10 years. So it'll be on a rotating fleet schedule. Usually around 10 years, we're investigating what the trade-in value is on the vehicle, so at least 10.
Okay, thank you. I urge people to support this article.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, if you're in favor of the motion, please say, vote yes. If you're opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 19, Mr. McMacken.
This is for some borrowing from the MWRA, Mass Water Resources Authority. I move that the sum of $500,000 is hereby appropriated to pay the cost of repairing and/or replacing water distribution lines and appurtenant structures, including the payment of all costs incidental and related therein, and that to meet this appropriation, the town treasurer, with the approval of the selectmen, is authorized to borrow said amount through the Mass Water Resources Authority or any other source under and pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 8, Paragraph 5, or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town, therefore, and that in connection with any borrowing through the MWRA, the town is authorized to enter into a loan agreement and/or security agreement with the MWRA relative to such borrowing.
Seconded by Mr. Hora. Further discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes, those opposed no. Those in favor, 125. Those opposed, 3. So the motion passes by far greater than two-thirds majority vote. Article 20. Mr. Vanderslice.
I move that the town raise and appropriate from available funds received from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in fiscal year 2024 in order to accomplish certain highway construction and maintenance under the provisions of the General Laws, Chapter 90, and other state transportation programs.
Seconded by Ms. Tarmy. Further discussion of that motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes, those opposed no. The motion carries. Article 21, community preservation. So we have a representative from the Community Preservation Fund.
I am.
Group. So
I am.
Brief introduction.
Does FinCom want to make an introductory statement and a recommendation, and then I can augment what you say?
We are going to make motions on each of the...
You are? Okay. All right.
Please do. Ms. Tarmy.
Thank you, Paul. I attended most of the CPC meetings since last November. This is a dedicated committee. With each application, they review it thoroughly. They sometimes go back to the applicants if something's missing, encourage them to make amendments to their applications. They are thorough, and I totally support what they do for the town. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So identify yourself and please say
I'm
what you
Paul
have to say.
Spurn from Mayolas Road. And at this point, traditionally, our chair makes a brief statement about what the CPC does. So I have the privilege to stand in for our chair today, Lynn Spencer, who is without a doubt the hardest working person I know. And that extends to the work that she has done on the CPC, first as a member for many years, and now for quite a number of years as chair. There is no way that I can substitute for her. All I can do is acknowledge and thank her for giving extraordinary, energetic, generous, and wise leadership to this committee, which otherwise would not be able to provide the great service that it does to the town. I'm honored to serve with her, and if she were here, I would ask you to stand and give her an ovation, but maybe we shouldn't set a precedent for interrupting the meeting that often. Okay. Do you want to talk about the individual recommendations, Bob?
I think what we mostly need is just a description of what the town
Sure.
body can do
Yeah.
and what it can't do, and then we can bring
Okay.
each one of these
All
up
right.
individually.
There's a wonderful summary report in great detail of what the CPC does and has done over the past 18 years. And I will read just the first paragraph and then give you some figures and examples of what it has done. The primary mission of the CPC is to protect and enhance Nahant's unique character as a coastal residential community. How? By facilitating efforts, number one, to preserve historic places and structures. Two, to retain and protect open spaces. Three, to increase or develop lands for recreational use. And fourth, to seek creative solutions to the problems of affordable housing in Nahant. Okay. And in order to do that, we review proposals that can come from citizens or organizations that meet qualifications for any one of these four uses. We use the money that is generated from property taxes, a 3% surcharge. That money is typically matched either substantially or in some years completely by the state, and it is also supplemented by funds that are often provided by the applicants for individual processes. As an overview, the project over these past 18 years have totaled almost $14 million in expense. And of that money, more than $4 million has come from the town. More than that, nearly $5 million has come from the state, and the remainder has come from the individual applicants, grants that they've obtained elsewhere, etc. And those projects have preserved and enhanced some of Nahant's greatest resources. And I'll just go down a list of names, and you will undoubtedly recognize, if not all of them, certainly most. The Life-Saving Station, Bailey's Hill, both the park and the gazebo, the Dory Club, the Village Church, the Life-Saving Stations, 40 Steps Beach, the library, the trails, particularly the Heritage Trail, Town Wharf, Town Hall. These have all been recipients of substantial funding that has helped to preserve and make them useful to our town. So I think one of the things you will see in the next year is posted signage that indicates for everyone, even if you haven't been here these past 18 years, what it is that CPC has done for the town, or what the town, I should say, has done for itself using CPC as a mechanism.
So, with regard to Item A. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Paul, for the record, we need a member of the committee to state that they have had a hearing on the articles that are included in the warrant and that the committee supports the articles that are featured in the warrant.
Thank you. Okay. We did have hearings, we had meetings. All of these items were approved unanimously by the members of the committee after attendees at the hearings had the opportunity to comment and ask for explanations both from the committee and from the project, those who submitted the projects.
Great, thank you very much. All right, with that, Julie, I think you can proceed on 21A.
This is for administrative costs. I move that the sum of $10,000 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation Fund estimated revenues for administrative and operating expenses of the Community Preservation Committee.
Seconded by Mr. McMacken. Further discussion of the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes, those opposed no. Motion carries. Article 21B, Mr. Barba.
I move that the sum of $71,720 is hereby appropriated from the fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation estimated revenues to upgrade the existing Flash Road public tennis courts with improvements of lighting, wind, and sunscreens to enhance the multi-uses of the courts, consistent with the application for CPA funding, including all incidental and related costs.
Seconded by Ms. Warren. Further discussion? Yes, sir. Behind you, Paul, excuse me.
Sorry. Hi, Ken Carangelo, 81 Willow Road. I just have a general question regarding all of these articles. One of the four pillars of the Community Preservation Act is that it fund affordable community housing. There have been a couple of those projects throughout the time that Mr. Spurn described. Can someone tell me what is the current reserve set aside for housing in the Community Preservation Fund? I also raise this because a year from now, several committees and/or people will have finished talking about affordable housing and other alternatives that are just starting to be discussed now. And I just want to ensure that we're in a position to do something when the time comes.
Do we have, Paul, do you have that information?
Yeah, I don't have the precise figure. It's over $100,000, but there's no limitation on the upper figure that we could devote to that. It's just that we cannot use that funds for any other function.
The general reserves is $169,664. The housing reserve is $5,817, and that's today before these votes. 10% will be put into the housing reserves after today. I'm not sure what that 10% equals, so that $5,817 in the housing reserves will go up after today's votes, whatever that 10% is.
I'm sorry, I stand corrected. I was thinking of the general fund.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir. T.
Chesley Taylor, 30 Flash Road. I'm in full support of this. A small history, back in the late 70s, Pat O'Connor, et cetera, and I tried to get something down there, and it turned out to be a very bad tennis court. And now we go down with our granddaughter, and it's full of people, and people are really enjoying this. It's not 100% and this will make it 100%, so I fully endorse this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes, those opposed no. The motion carries. Motion 21C, Ms. Tarmy.
I move that the sum of $23,775 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation Estimated Revenues for restoring and digitizing badly degraded historical records, Nahant School Registers from 1963 to 1968, consistent with the application for CPA funding by the Nahant Historical Society, including all incidental and related costs.
Seconded by Mr. Vanderslice. Gee, I think I'd vote against this if it was restoring my school records from 63, but I think the rest of it's good. Further discussion? Seeing none and hearing none, those in favor of the motion vote yes, those opposed no. The motion carries. Motion 21D, Ms. Tarmy.
I move that the sum of $46,500 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation Estimated Revenues for continued restoration work at the Fort Ruckman section of the east slope of Bailey's Hill, including all incidental and related costs.
Seconded by Mr. McMacken. We seem to be losing, we're losing coverage here.
Did everybody hear me?
Hello? Hello? Whoa.
You're back.
That gives me power.
Is it back? It's back. I move that the sum of $46,500 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation Estimated Revenues for continued restoration work at the Fort Ruckman section of the east slope of Bailey's Hill, including all incidental and related costs.
Seconded by Mr. Vanderslice.
I would just like to say one thing about this. If you haven't been over to Bailey's Hill recently, please visit it, because the work that's been done already by the town with the help of the CPC is amazing. I highly recommend that you take a look and see how the dollars are working, because it's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Ken Corangelo, 81 Willow Road. I wholeheartedly agree with Ms. Tarmy, and I have, living on Willow Road, been seeing the work that the DPW has done for what they've done so far, and I agree, it's a tremendous job. This particular funding is asking to do more on top of that, specifically, if I understand correctly, removing currently mature trees and other vegetation and replacing them with native species. There's already been a fair amount of construction down there, which is fairly disruptive. It's a beautiful spot as it is. It's been improved with funding from last year, and I personally believe that this is not particularly necessary at this point, and that these funds would be better used elsewhere, either in the general reserve or the housing reserve. So I would move, therefore, I guess, do I move to, do we just vote no, or do I need to move, or what do we need to do?
I think you'd have to vote no. If you're opposed to the motion, then you'd have to vote no.
Can I move to indefinitely postpone?
You can do that. It'd be a subsidiary motion, but yeah, you could do that. But or if you defeat this motion, then that fulfills the same result that you have. So it's, you're switching one thing to the other. If you just defeat this motion, that's exactly what you're looking for. So I would vote no, but if you want to move to indefinitely postpone, and you got a second, then it confuses things, because it means now people are voting yes to be no to this article.
True.
So
I mean,
I think it would be.
This is a sophisticated audience who's been through this before, so I think I will move to indefinitely postpone this article.
Motion's been made to indefinitely postpone. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded to indefinitely postpone. We are voting on a motion to indefinitely postpone motion 21D of the Community Preservation Act. Mr. Administrator, you have a wish to speak?
I just wanted to, for clarification, Ken, this funding is actually for the planting of vegetation. So it's not for removal of any more vegetation. It's actually to replant new trees and grass.
So Nancy Cantelmo, 31 Summer Street. I'm a member of Open Space as well as CPC, and I'm in concurrence with what you say. All of the work that involves the tree taking down that he's complaining about is done. And by the way, those were dead trees, expired trees. They had to come down before they fell on someone. So sorry it was noisy, but it had to be done. And the planting plan was part of the phase 1. This is phase 2, which is for the installation of the native species, and also to do some work further taking care of invasive species. So planting of natives, doing more native species work. So I would not support indefinitely postponing this motion.
I think we might be able to shortcut this. Ken, in view of that understanding, do you want to withdraw your motion to, no?
I'd like to speak on the issue. Patricia Magner, 15 Breezy Hill Terrace, a 66-year resident of the Bass Point area. There's a signage that says this project is Bailey's Hill restoration. People use the term Bailey's Hill constantly. Bailey's Hill is in the same condition it was over 35 years ago when trees fell across the path. The work that's being done is on Gardner Road, used to be called Willow Road. Willow Road, all the deeds that anybody has for property on Gardner Road is Willow Road. There's all this work. There is no access to Fort Ruckman off Tri-Mountain Road because this clearing that's being done is being done for the benefit of the military housing project. There is no entranceway into Fort Ruckman from Bass Point, just so you know that. All this gas work that was done, there's gas work in the sidewalk for the military housing. So I think this should be indefinite postponement so that we can spend our money to restore Fort Ruckman appropriately and Bailey's Hill appropriately, but we shouldn't be having money available so it can be diverted for other purposes and then have no access to Fort Ruckman. Because if there's any plans about the military housing that affects that continuation of the road, Willow Road, which is currently blocked but all of a sudden has been cleaned up, that doesn't allow us access into Fort Ruckman. So you could have everything, but it's not for the benefit of the taxpayers of the town of Nahant. And so I say indefinite postponement on this until such time as they resolve military housing and housing issues and all of that. It's nice to have, we need to spend our money where it needs to be spent.
Thank you, Pat. Yes?
So I just want to respond to some of those comments and just clear it up, and I'm happy to discuss it further if there's any follow-up questions. This project doesn't have anything to do with the military housing. It actually doesn't restore the fort itself. This is the slope adjacent to Ocean View on the golf course side of Fort Ruckman. Last year, we got funds from the CPC to remove invasive species and regrade that slope. That work's been done, and now these funds are to replant the area with the proper plantings. So there's no, you said that there wasn't access to Fort Ruckman itself. If you're speaking about the tunnel itself, no, this has nothing to do with that. There is access off of Gardner Road. There's a dirt road that goes to the top of Fort Ruckman, and there's paths among that system that comes down the other side. And lastly, on the other comment, we also got funded last year, CPC funds, to work on Bailey's Hill, actual Bailey's Hill, where the resident's correct. There's been a lot of trees that have fallen down and interrupted the path system. All of that's actually already been cleared, and we're working on restoring that as well.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Paula Devereaux, 4 Interville Road, Nahant. I rise to urge this meeting to vote no on a definite postponement. This is a really important project to finish what was started on the side of the hill, as Tony explained, looking towards the water and the golf course. Without the plantings being finished in that area, it's subject to further erosion and further sliding, basically, and losing what we've done so far. This was always part of the plan, and the Open Space Committee, of which I'm a member, worked on this with the CPC and with the town, and we think it's a great job's been done. It's a really nice area. It's a nice area to walk up to, and without these funds, we won't be able to finish the project, and it's critical that this be finished. Thank you.
Yes. Patty speaking for the second and final time.
Is it okay?
Yeah, you can speak again.
Pat Magner. Clarification, that connector that you call to the Fort Ruckman property, which is entailed property by the federal government, it's entailed until 1945. The town cannot touch a piece of that for any purpose. They can't move roads. They can't push it over there. If the town touches it, that becomes saleable property by the federal government. The town has no say in who they sell it to. They could sell it to a developer, and you could have 10,000 apartments on Fort Ruckman. So all I'm saying is I support the indefinite postponement until we get all these other issues straight. We shouldn't be spending our money on those issues right now. We should be spending them on the big issues, like having affordable housing in town and things like that.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion for indefinite postponement? Seeing and hearing none. Now they've kind of turned it topsy-turvy. If you're in favor of the general motion, this has reduced it to motion indefinite postpone. So if you're in favor of the general motion, we first have to defeat the motion to indefinitely postpone. So you should vote no to the indefinite postponement if you're in favor of the general motion. And if you're in favor of the motion to indefinitely postpone, vote yes. With that in mind, we will go ahead and do a vote. The indefinite postponement is defeated. However, that does not take care of the motion as it was originally read, and I think it has to be reread, and then we'll have a quick vote on it and move on. Thank you very much.
I move that the sum of $46,500 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation estimated revenues for continued restoration work at the Fort Ruckman section of the east slope of Bailey's Hill, including all incidental and related costs.
Seconded by Mr. Vanderslice. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor, vote yes. Those opposed, vote no. The motion carries. We have some seats down here. If anybody's in back would come down and like to sit, we have some seats down in the front row, and we promise we won't embarrass you. Just come on down and sit down and be comfortable. We've got plenty of room down here. Article 22, Mr. Barba.
21E. I move that the sum of $29,000 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation estimated revenues for the restoration projects at Lodge Park and East Point, consistent with the application for CPA funding by the Nahant Open Space and Recreation Committee, including all incidental and related costs.
Second by Mr. McMacken. Further discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes, those opposed no. The motion carries. Article 21F, Mr. Barba.
I move that the sum of $50,000 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation estimated revenues for the planting of trees and the restoration of 3 pedestrian bridges at Kelly Greens, consistent with the application for CPA funding by the town of Nahant, including all incidental and related costs.
Seconded by Ms. Tarmy. Further discussion on this motion? Seeing it, yeah, you can go ahead and sit there. They're fine, any place, whether they're reserved or not. You guys are good. All right. Seeing no further discussion, those in favor vote yes, those opposed no. The motion carries. Article 21G, Mr. Barba.
I move that the sum of $20,000 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation estimated revenues for the planning and implementation of the town's rights of way, consistent with the application for CPA funding by the town of Nahant, including all incidental and related costs.
Seconded by Mr. Horace. Further discussion on this motion? Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor.
Chesley Taylor, and in honor of Pete Rogers, I still live at 30 Flash Road. Back in 2015, when I became a selectman, I had a few people approach me asking about right-of-ways, and I went and investigated, and it was in Big Nahant, and there are some people who have taken over right-of-ways. They've taken them over and made them part of their yards. My only problem with that is that they're getting free land, they're not paying taxes. That's number one. Number two, their rights of ways. But I fully support this. Signage is going to be a lot of fun, because when a sign comes to someone's yard and, wow, wait a minute. Specifically, 6 feet have been taken over in some places. A whole yard was taken over in another place, and I'll just leave it at that. But this is something that really needs to be done. But I don't know how you enforce it. It's probably be very laborious, but I support this 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes, those opposed no. Motion carries. Article 21H, Ms. Tarmy.
I move that the sum of $25,000 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation Estimated Revenues for transforming Town of Nahant vital records from 1980 to present into a format that will ensure their preservation consistent with the application for CPA funding by the Town of Nahant, including all incidental and related costs.
Seconded by Ms. Warren. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes, those opposed no. The motion carries. Article 21I, Ms. Warren.
Town Hall Green Lawn Cemetery Debt Service. I move that the sum of $52,850 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation estimated revenues for the payment of the debt service for the Town Hall and Green Lawn Cemetery bonding authorized by the 2022 Annual Town Meeting, Article 22H.
Seconded by Mr. Barba. Further discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes, those opposed no. The motion carries. Article 21J, Ms. Warren.
I move that the sum of $68,000 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation estimated revenues for the payment of the debt service for the public library bonding authorized by the 2021 Annual Town Meeting, Article 21E.
Seconded by Ms. Zahora. Further discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes, those opposed no. The motion carries. Article 21K, Ms. Warren.
I move that the sum of $50,152 is hereby appropriated from fiscal year 2024 Community Preservation estimated revenues for the payment of the debt service for the public library bonding authorized by the 2019 Annual Town Meeting, Article 16C.
Seconded by Mr. McMacken. Further discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes, those opposed no. Motion carries. Article 22L, Mr. McMacken.
This is the revenue set aside. I move that the town set aside revenues from fiscal year 2024 estimated Community Preservation Fund revenues for later appropriation, any other amount not otherwise set aside or appropriated as aforesaid to be maintained in the Community Preservation Fund General Reserves account.
Seconded by Mrs. Zohar. Further discussion of that motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor signify by voting yes. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Just a reminder, the vote doesn't count till what? Okay. Just a clue for using these automatic things. Don't press your vote until you see the 10-second button up there, because it doesn't count until that's up. All right, Article 22. Ms. Zahora.
I move that Article 6 of the town's general bylaws are amended by adding a new section, as shown in Appendix 6 of the report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee on pages 75 to 76, for review in the town clerk's office, to form a 7-member open space committee to be appointed by the moderator to replace the annually continued Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee and to implement the Nahant Open Space and Recreation Plan.
Seconded by Mr. Barba. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor vote yes. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. Article 23, Ms. Warren.
Motion 23, Police Bylaws, Feeding Wildlife Amendment. I move that the town's police bylaws are amended by adding Article 14, Wildlife Feeding, as shown in Appendix A of the report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee on pages 71 to 73, and for review in the town clerk's office, to increase the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of the community by restricting the feeding of wild animals.
Seconded by Mr. Barba. Further discussion? Yes, sir.
Sandy Burton, 296 Nahant Road. I just have a question. Are birds included in wildlife description? Bird feeders are allowed, but they're still wildlife. They should probably clear that up a little bit. For instance, there's a gentleman in town who feeds seagulls down at the wharf many days. Is that considered allowed? So there's some vagary about this particular thing.
If you look at page 72, there's a definition for wildlife. Wildlife shall mean any undomesticated and unrestrained animal or fowl, including but not limited to coyotes, foxes, raccoons, skunks, and other animals or fowl, including gulls and geese. So yes, feeding seagulls at the wharf would not be allowed.
Further discussion on the motion? Yes, ma'am. Mr. Administrator, there's a question that the lady would like to address. I can't quite hear it, but
I didn't get the question. Question was about coyotes? I was this close. So I didn't get the question. It was, no, I didn't hear your question. It's all right. Okay. Okay, so the question was, yep. So the question was about whether we conducted the management plan with the USDA. We did. It really isn't, it's somewhat tied to this article, but it isn't. This article is part of that effort to try to reduce conflicts with coyotes. Sometimes those conflicts are caused because of this type of feeding. So this article will allow us to ensure that people aren't feeding the wildlife and hopefully prevent some of those conflicts from happening.
Thank you. Further discussion? Yes, can we have your name for the record, please? Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for contributing to our town meeting. Madam, you are welcome. Welcome to Nahant. Thank you very much. All right, further discussion on this motion? Seeing and hearing none, if you're in favor of the motion, vote yes. If you're opposed, no. Motion carries 165 to 15. Thank you very much. Next motion. Motion 24, Mr. Vanderslice.
Right. Article 24. I move that the question be divided to separate the vote to adopt the general bylaw amendments found in Appendix 7 and the vote to amend the zoning bylaw as found in Appendix 9.
Seconded by Mr. McMacken.
So just a brief word of explanation on the what and why of this motion to divide. So what this does is it takes one article that appears in the warrant, one article that appears on page 23 in the Finance Committee book, and divides it into two pieces. Each piece will be motioned, discussed, and voted separately.
So our town bylaws provide that if a motion can be divided, it will be divided, provided 7 voters are in favor of the division. And in this case, we looked at this the other night in our pre-meeting meeting, and you've got a very large amount of regulation, and then you have zoning provisions as well. So it's a perfect example of what should be divided, and that's why the motion has been brought.
Right. So the first motion will be on the general bylaw changes, and that's what gives the selectmen the authority and to regulate and enforce regulations over covering short-term rentals. And the second of the two will be the zoning bylaw changes, which establishes the special permit. Right? Does that make sense?
So
Voting on the motion to divide?
Correct.
yeah, so I think it can easily be handled. Are there 7 people who will stand in favor of dividing the motion? Okay, the motion stands divided. Thank you. Now we turn to. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Is the point of dividing it so that the general bylaw, which can be voted on by a majority, versus the zoning portion, which requires more than a majority?
No, that's not the reason for it, but it's the result of it. You're exactly right, Pauline. And it's So it's another reason why you would want to divide it, because you've got two different measures of vote on the two sections. So it makes perfect sense.
So
Thank you.
The why or the reason is it really is two separate questions, and we'd like to separate the two issues and give each issue its due. And it also gives you, the voters, more control over what's going on and how you're voting to regulate.
Okay, so further discussion. Now you're on the first part, I take it?
We're on the first of the two motions, the motion on the general bylaws. I move that the town's general bylaws are amended by adding Article 19 as shown in Appendix 7 of the report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee on pages 77 to 81 to regulate short-term rentals. Right, so this motion establishes or puts in place general bylaws that give the selectmen the power to make regulations and to enforce regulations over short-term rentals.
And that's seconded by Ms. Tarmy, by the way.
I'm getting way ahead of myself on that. Without this article, there are no regulations over short-term rentals. So right now, there are no regulations regarding short-term rentals in the town of Nahant. The Finance Committee believes regulations are appropriate and really necessary, and the way we looked at it is probably a good framework. We believe there are concerns about public safety. We believe there are concerns about occupant safety. We believe there are concerns about public nuisance. We believe there are concerns, big concerns about regulating the housing stock. And the Finance Committee sort of kidded me when I said this, and I think it's still appropriate. It's kind of an old wise adage that says, don't let the pursuit of perfection be the enemy of good. And I think that's the situation that's facing us right now.
Further discussion? Yes, sir.
I actually wanted to make a motion to the article on the zoning bylaw amendment. I don't know if I could do it now, or I have to wait till the zoning bylaw stuff.
Yes, I'm afraid so, but that's
Okay, well,
okay. It'll all come up. We'll
wait.
guarantee it. Don't
I'll
worry
wait.
about it.
I'll wait.
All right, good. Behind you is another gentleman who wants to speak, I think.
I understand he's waiting. Go ahead. Yep, thank you.
Mike Allworth, 31 Summer Street. I'm in favor of this motion. I think it's not a good idea for the town to be an outlier as compared to other communities around here, most of whom regulate short-term rentals. There's a good reason for it. Obviously, it makes sense for the phenomenon of Airbnbs, et cetera, to have some place in the town. That's been duly considered by the committee that was appointed more than a year ago and has worked very diligently on this matter to consider what's the best balance point between the interests of neighbors, the interests of people who own property and who want to rent them out, the interests of visitors and so forth. It's not an easy balance, and in that regard, I endorse what Mr. Vanderslice says, that the town can return to this subject in future town meetings, but in the interim, at least until next town meeting, the best thing for us to do is to commit the future guidance of this matter to our selectmen, whom we have voted, and they're in the best position to take the temperature of what's going on, see what's working, see what does not work. They can make regulations, they can amend their regulations. There is, in particular, the value of this provision will provide for an annual permit which needs to be renewed. That means somebody who's an operator of a short-term rental, who, by the way, can be somebody who lives in California or Singapore or Shanghai, they have something to lose if they're not responsible operators. And that's a provision that the selectmen can grant or not grant for the future. So I think to deal with the future needs of the town, it's best committed to the selectmen. We do need a way to regulate this process so that there can be proper visitation by people who are customers of Airbnbs, and I think that's best left in the hands of the selectmen. So I respectfully urge a yes vote on this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been remiss in that we have the chair of the planning board here who's supposed to present a report on it. And you're welcome to use this if you would like, and appreciate your patience. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Rob Steinberg. I'm chairman of the planning board, live at 33 Winter Street. I did not know I was supposed to present a summary, but I will just briefly describe what we did. We held hearings in September to review the process. A group called the Short-Term Rental Committee was appointed, and they looked very deeply at the issue. We recommended in our preliminary hearings that there be restrictions on short-term rentals. I think it's very important we have those restrictions. The Short-Term Rental Committee made the proposal, which is contained in Article 24. The planning board held hearings on that article and strongly recommends that the town pass Article 24. The first part of Article 24, as it has been divided, prohibits commercial use, prohibits disruptions and nuisances created by short-term housing, but most importantly, has a cap on the number of short-term units, and also allows the Board of Selectmen to promulgate regulations. We made a number of recommendations on regulations in terms of restricting parties, late night activities. That doesn't exist right now. There have been some problems, but we believe with this regulatory regime we'll have a far better handle on the issue. We also recommended the zoning bylaw, which allows the ZBA to requires that non-owner occupied short-term rental hosts get permission from the ZBA in the form of a special permit. So we're very satisfied as a board, a planning board, to endorse Article 24 and strongly recommend a positive vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Dan Dolce, 124 Castle Road. Like most of you, I'm a supporter of short-term rentals, and I urge you instead to vote in favor of the citizens petition proposal, which is at Article 25, instead of this much less comprehensive proposal at Article 24. As most of you remember, when we voted to enact the short-term rental committee back in our 2021 town meeting, I thought, probably as most of you did, that they would create specific regulation proposals that then we as a town would come back the following year and have an opportunity to vote our stamp of approval at the next town meeting. Unfortunately, it's been 2 years and the committee has not finished their mandate and instead has submitted this Article 24, which is incomplete and has no specifics on the most important rules, such as for registration and penalties and enforcement, for all the hours that the committee did spend working on this proposal. Instead, they passed the buck over to the Board of Selectmen, who are then supposed to waste more time to create these specific rules and regulations. And then in the end, we residents would not even be able to vote on what the Board of Selectmen comes up with as a final product. In contrast, you'll see the citizens petition at Article 25 has very detailed and strict rules to ensure the general welfare of our historic town of Nahant. We want to preserve our beautiful vistas and harbors that encompass varied wildlife, coastal beaches, leafy parks. We want to preserve that for the hardworking and diverse residents and businesses. And although our town is largely a community of owner-occupied single-family dwellings, almost 20% of households are rental units. And current short-term rentals constitute only a small percentage of all town households. This despite Nahant's history as a seaside resort community. However, the increased popularity of these internet technologies for vacation planning like Airbnb, VRBO, especially over the past decade, has also enabled Nahant residents to share the joys of its community to visiting family members, vacationers, business travelers, indeed to people from all over the world, while also creating income for residents, businesses, and now that we enacted to collect the tax revenue for the town. Despite providing a much-needed service to the town, as we have no hotels, inns, or motels, especially to great overall benefit with little disruption to the community, the rules set forth in the Article 25 Citizens Petition will establish a fair and orderly framework to oversee short-term rental units, balance long-term residential use, public safety, and opportunities for rental income and town revenue. Even though the town already has parking, health, safety, and building code rules, the citizens' proposal at Article 25 expands upon these existing rules while also detailing the requirements for annual registration and fees, inspections, guest requirements, violations, penalties, and enforcement. Additionally, there are further significant protections for the town in the Article 25 Citizens Petition, such as, number one, capping maximum number of total short-term rental units, requiring notification to neighbors, prohibition of commercial operations or events, official quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., requiring an operator or their agent and manager to be readily available to address complaints such as active nuisances, revocation of registration upon sale of the property, and like any other property would be subject already to zoning board of appeal enforcement actions. So therefore, I urge residents to reject this Article 24 and instead approve Article 25 that already has complete common sense rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes? Yeah. Excuse.
I'd like to thank Dan for all the work he did on the issue and the citizens group that put forward Article 25. They operated in good faith to create regulations. But I would say it's not unusual for governments to have an overarching statutory, overarching statute to govern an area and then ask that regulations specifically be put forth to govern the registration process, the permit process, the enforcement process. It's a lot easier to do it in that context than to have a very large number of restrictions and regulations. So what the planning board decided in this regard is we would let the Board of Selectmen issue the regulations. We strongly urge them to do that quickly. And then after 6 months, the planning board would then review what the Board of Selectmen has done, how it's working out, and we'd make further recommendations at the next town meeting. So the citizens did a very good job. We actually issued a lot of far-reaching regulations. We, in the end, agreed that the approach of having a general framework of a prohibition, no commercial use, etc., and then allowing the ZBA to look at the special permits and then have the Board of Selectmen create this registration process was the best way to go. So I think we can have really solid regulations, and just passing the general framework is a big step forward for the town. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Brendan Bronick, Homestead, 2 Summer Street. I would urge support for Article 24. Article 25 is lacking ability to prevent hedge funds and people from outside the state and even the country from purchasing and buying up properties. And then there's a need for regulation to prevent long-term monopolies. If we're looking to ultimately look at our housing situation, there would be a need to regulate and prevent too much consolidation of these rental properties over time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barba.
Yeah, I'm actually speaking on behalf of myself as a citizen, so Pete Barber, 22 Emerald Road. Couple of points of information. One is that some of you may be thinking, why don't we just ban Airbnb altogether? Unfortunately, there's a law that we can't do that. So I wanted to kind of clarify that. So if you were thinking, oh, we can vote these laws down and then eventually ban Airbnbs, that's not possible. I fully endorse this article. I think it's a start. It's where we're one of the few communities on the North Shore that don't currently have Airbnb laws or short-term rental laws, so we really need to start someplace. Currently, the Board of Selectmen issue licenses, liquor licenses, and things like that. So putting the purview of short-term rental with the selectmen to create the rules and regulations or to enforce rules and regulations is the right thing to do. So I request that you endorse Article 24.
Thank you. Paul?
Hi, Paul Spurn, 36 Mayolas Road. I have a question before I make a very brief substantive statement about my opinion on this article, and that is, to what extent does the bylaw section, the first thing we're considering in this split article, to what extent does it hamstring the Board of Selectmen, or can they choose to upend anything in the bylaws that we pass by virtue of voting for this amendment? Do they still have a free hand when it comes to establishing regulations?
Are you suggesting that if they upend something, they would be incarcerated for violating the bylaw, or?
No.
I think that would not be appropriate, so, but our town council will respond.
Great question, Paul. The Board of Selectmen have to
He thought it was a good question, by the way.
I thought it was a great question.
I didn't disagree with it. I just was trying to explain it.
I see. I'm sorry.
Any way to clarify is a great question. The Board of Selectmen will be required to abide by the bylaws. They cannot contradict the bylaws. What the Selectmen will have discretion to do pursuant to the statute, 64G, I think it's section 14, says they can regulate the local licensing process, which is to say create regulations, not bylaws, regulations, to determine what the proper process is for licensing. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. Okay.
Are you sure?
I think it's probably a much more detailed discussion than we have time for. Let me give you an example of what's bothering me. I expect that as some part of either the bylaw section or perhaps the zoning section, there will be a reference to some process that permits public discussion of whether a particular renter is allowed to keep offering a property, okay? Whether that's a license or something else. And as it stands now, if I were eager to speak to what my neighbor is doing regarding short-term rentals, I need to know when and how to do that. And as it stands now, it puts a tremendous burden on me to keep track of town activities. And that might be Board of Selectmen meetings, or Board of Selectmen hearings, or zoning meetings, or zoning hearings, et cetera, et cetera. I am going to urge, if I make this an amendment, it's just going to make this interminable. So I won't propose an amendment. But I'm speaking primarily to the Board of Selectmen, that one thing this town desperately needs is a means of notifying citizens electronically of what's coming up, whether those are hearings or Board of Selectmen meeting, so I don't have to go to the town website and look for things, okay? I get emails from a lot of people I'd rather not hear from, but I would love to hear from the town of Nahant about this sort of administrative activity. It's critical, and I don't think I'm missing an opportunity to opt for that now, am I? There is such a thing.
You can subscribe to the community calendar, and every time it's updated, you'll get an email.
Yeah, I'm not sure that fulfills that, but that's certainly in the right spirit, Tony. I agree. But I think we ought to have a very careful, detailed checklist of things that individual town members want to be informed of. And that should be put out on a regular basis and show up in my email along with a lot of other things that I don't want to see. Okay.
To that point,
Thank you.
To that point, Paul, much like the liquor licensing, this will be an annual registration process. So every year, any neighbors, any interested parties will have an opportunity to say anything they need to say regarding the renewed registration. And to sort of bring these two things together, if you look at Section 6 of the proposed general bylaws, it does talk about no nuisance, which is a hook that could give an abutter a reason to lobby for a non-renewal registration if there have been problems in the previous year. So that was something the committee did take to heart, and that was the response.
Right, but not to kick this dead dog any harder, those may be the rules, and that may be the scheme, but if I don't know how and where to appear and how to present myself, do I have to present it in writing first? Can I just show up and discuss? That needs to be taken care of, I think.
How are you suggesting those be transmitted?
By email. Email? Yeah, I would start with email, and I guess there might be a few people who want written notice, but I think that's probably not going to be possible.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor.
Chesley Taylor, 30 Flash Road. I will be brief. I support this article. I support all the work that everyone's done. One of the main things that I'd like to give to people of the town is I have a concern about the future spending and the future bills that may be coming our way from different activities. The main thing that I like about this is the town gets a decent amount of money. And I've checked on it. You know, the town administrator has been very helpful with me. And that's reason enough if you're confused at all. You have to have rules to start. We haven't had rules, but now we do. So let's start and let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm looking for my voice. I actually had the thoughts and then my voice lost them. But my parents came here in 1946 on short-term rental. And we came back and back maybe 10 times. So to me, there's a huge history of short-term rentals in Nahant. We wanted to go to the beach, you know, so we were across the street from the beach. It is a wonderful place to do that. Now, one of the things I have with my house, first of all, we have 5 wedding venues and no hotels. So one of the reasons to have the Airbnb, particularly for this community, is to give people access to wedding venues that we've already approved of. And I think that's really important. The other thing, though, and I totally agree, and I've been called before the board of the lawyer, is we have to respect our neighbors. One of the ways to respect them is provide parking. Now, possibly there might be an idea, so somebody invites the people and they all come in a car. One of the things I found out that I did a reunion of women. Now, it was 14 women and I have plenty of space, but there were 14 cars. And I didn't like that, but at the same time, and I have a neighbor who goes, well, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh yeah, oh God, 14 cars. And he goes right to the town and complains. So to me, I couldn't keep my house without Airbnb. It's essential. I retired. My business went to hell because of the pandemic and the recession, and I had really nothing left to keep my house except. So I have been doing Airbnb probably longer than anybody else, about 10 years. And it has made all the difference of whether I can be here or not do. And I've had people say, well, if you can't afford to live here, move. Well, you know, I got 2.5 acres. I got a beautiful house that I designed and built. And there's a part of me that wants to keep it. But I'm one person in this, 8-bedroom house. So Airbnb has saved me. And it's not, put it this way, it's not a gift to me. It's not easy. There's a lot of responsibility in it, and there's also the responsibility for my neighbors. But I only have parking for maybe 80 cars. But I know a lot of neighborhoods that don't have the parking for the people who live in the neighborhood. And so, if you had some parking set off where the Airbnb gave permits down in our town parking and people could be bussed over there, that might be one solution. And that just occurred to me here, but it's really important to respect the community. And I can tell you something in terms of bylaws. I use those against the guests. I say, well, town has a 10 o'clock curfew, and then somebody tells me, well, it really doesn't. But I do, and I just say the town does. And I think it's important to have regulations like that because things can get out of hand. And they have, and Airbnb has changed it. You used to be able to go to a place and have a party. Well, you can't. You can come here and stay at my house, but you can't have a party. The other thing is, I just got a request. Somebody wanted to do a baby shower. I said no, because I don't know. And other people have said they wanted to do a bachelor party. And I say no. Pardon?
Someone has suggested calling the question. If you want to call the question, you have to get in line like everybody else and take your spot.
Hi, I will be brief if I may speak.
You may certainly speak, but identify. Your predecessor didn't identify himself, but we know who he is. Go ahead, identify yourself for the record and say what you want to say.
My name is Deborah Vanderslice. I live at 368 Nahant Road. I have my own mind. I don't necessarily agree with my husband all the time. But I just want to say that that was Carter Smith that just spoke. And, I understand. I get it that people need money sometimes to stay in Nahant. I want to say I'm a proponent of free enterprise system. I am not opposed to Airbnbs. But I think at the end of the day, those of us who live in this quaint town just want good neighbors, whether they're renting, people are renting on short-term rentals, permanent residents, or whatever. I've lived here 25 years, and I have mostly awesome neighbors. There was a period in time when I did not, and when Mark Cullinan was the town manager, he can tell you that he got calls from me a lot. That problem has been remedied. So at the end of the day, this is not about eliminating short-term rentals. It's about trying to maintain good neighbors, good neighborhoods in the town. And so all I can say is that I'm for licensure. If you look at this, it's no different from a hotel or an inn. These entities have annual licensures, and that's what this is. It's just to be able to put some mechanism in place to try and keep the town like it is, not imposing strict regimes on anybody, but just to be able to call on these regulations at the rare time when there may be a need. So I encourage you to think about that and to vote for Article 24.
Thank you. Mr. McMacken, yes, please.
Thank you, Dave. Dan McMacken, 20 Rollins Avenue, speaking as a citizen. This issue is obviously controversial. We do not have the right to ban short-term rentals flat out. That may have some support. There may be some folks who would like to do that. We've already determined that that is just not possible under the laws of the Commonwealth. So what we do need to do is we need to be able to limit them, restrict them, and regulate them as best done by the Board of Selectmen. The Finance and Advisory Committee has worked feverishly and diligently at great length to hammer this out. I urge you to vote for this. The subsequent motion, the citizens' motion, has largely been comprised by folks who aim to rent property. Some of them are not even Nahanters. We wish to restrict, restrain, and control this. And the people that can do that best are the people you voted for, our selectmen. We need to empower them to look after our best interests. Property owners have property rights, and they're entitled to enjoy the benefits of their properties. They are protected. They are especially protected under this. But what I can say is I urge you to vote for 25 as recommended by the Finance Advisory Committee. 24. We have worked pretty feverishly to bring this before you, and none of us stand to benefit from it personally, unlike the folks on the citizens' petition. Thank you.
I'm hoping I could even, there we go. I got you guys now. All right, Mr. Sheehan, please identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dana Sheehan of 40 Valley Road. I move to call the question.
The question has been called for, and that means that debate will be cut off. The calling of the question is no. The question is whether to call the question or not. Those in favor of calling the question signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Unanimous vote in favor. Now we call for the motion on 24. Let me see. So the motion on 24 is to move that the town general bylaws amended by adding Article 19 as shown in Appendix 7 of the report at pages 77 to 81 to regulate short-term rentals. All those in favor of that motion, vote yes. Those opposed, no. The motion passes 156 to 28. This brings up the second half of the motion dealing with the zoning bylaws. So, Mr. Vanderslice?
I move that the town's zoning bylaws are amended as shown in Appendix 9 of the report and recommendations of the Advisory and Finance Committee on pages 87 to 94 to address the use of short-term rentals as promulgated by the Short-Term Rental Bylaw Advisory Committee.
Seconded by Mr. Barber. Further discussion on this zoning bylaw part of it? Yes, sir. There you are. I told you we'd be here. I knew you were.
I'm not going anywhere.
I knew you were persistent.
I would like to make a motion to amend the current. Oh, I'm sorry, George Mahovan, 64 Lenox Road, Nahant, Mass. 63 years in this town. So again, I would like to make a motion to amend the current proposed zoning bylaw changes as follows. Article 24, zoning bylaw amendment, Section 4.13, Table 1, table use of regulations, description of use.
Hold on 1 second. Are you referring to a particular page in the report? I think you are.
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth.
What?
First of all, I'd like to clear up a question. People have been saying that we cannot ban short-term rentals in this town. We can't ban owner-occupied short-term rentals, but we can ban non-owner-occupied short-term rentals in this town. It's been done all around the state of Massachusetts. Boston does it, the biggest city in the state of Massachusetts. So people aren't informed enough here. We can stop the non-owner-occupied rentals, short-term rentals in this town. And I would like to make an amendment to that for the description of use short-term rentals, non-owner occupied in residential R1 and R2 districts change from special permit to N, not permitted at all.
Okay, could you, page 91 in here? All right. So let's look on page 91 of the report. I just want to see what language you're talking about, Josh, and so we make your motion clear. So
91, I'm going there. I'm a little bit nervous.
do you see it? Okay, so R1 and R2, short-term, non-owner occupied, you have special permit for R1 and R2.
Yeah, I'd like
And
to
you
change
wanna-
that.
You want to just take
Change it
that
to
as
N,
being
not permitted.
N.
Yeah, that would save, I think, all kinds of problems with this, because we are allowed to be in short-term rentals, non-owner occupied in this town. It's a detriment to the town that people keep talking about, oh, they're gonna have friends and relatives, weddings, and so on and so forth. We're ready to open up another wedding reception hall over at the old Bayside. It's gonna destroy this town. There's not that much money coming in from these people. A lot of them don't even live in the town, they don't even live in the state. No excise tax, no this, no that. Property value goes down. Hang on now.
So I hear you, and, is there a second for the motion? Second. All right, motion moved and seconded to change on page 91, the entries under R1 and R2 next to short-term rental, non-owner occupied, and you wish to change them from SP to N.
For non-permitted, yes.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the motion before the House. Further discussion?
Can I explain why?
You're entitled to discuss it,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right,
Further
thank you very much.
discussion on the motion.
Okay, well, we all know the town of Nahant is a beautiful place to work and raise a family. However, the recent proliferation of non-owner occupied short-term rentals is having a negative impact on our community. I have two of them, one right beside me, one across the street. It has been a nuisance for us, people coming and going at all hours of the night, slamming car doors, waking myself and my wife up. Some of the negative impacts on short-term rentals include the properties that are rented out for a short period of time, typically to tourists or vacationers. They are often located in residential neighborhoods and have a significant impact on the quality of life for those who live nearby. Increased noise and traffic, reduced parking availability, decreased property value. I wouldn't want to buy a house next to a short-term rental. Increased crime, a loss of sense of community. In addition, the short-term rentals contribute to the problem of housing affordability in Nahant. When the property is used as a short-term rental, it is no longer available for long-term rental, which can make it more difficult for people to find affordable housing in this town. For these reasons, I am proposing that the town of Nahant ban non-owner occupied short-term rentals. This would help to protect our community from the negative impacts of short-term rentals and ensure that Nahant remain a desirable place to live. I urge you to support this proposal, and again, special concerns. You're very noisy, especially when guests are coming and going late night, early in the morning. This can be a major nuisance for neighbors, especially those who work early in the morning or have young children. Traffic can also lead to increased traffic. Short-term rentals can also increase traffic in residential neighborhoods. They can make it difficult for residents to find parking and can also increase the risk of accidents. Reduced parking availability. Short-term rentals often have multiple guests who may not all have their own cars. They can lead to shortage of parking in residential neighborhoods, making it difficult for residents to find places to park their own cars. Decreased property values. Short-term rentals have a negative impact on property values in residential neighborhoods. This is because potential buyers are less likely to want to live in a neighborhood where there are a lot of short-term rentals due to noise, traffic, and other things. And also, a loss of sense of community. Short-term rentals can also contribute to the loss of sense of community in residential neighborhoods. They also often have transient population of guests who do not get to know their neighbors or become involved in the community. it makes it difficult for residents to enjoy their homes and their neighborhoods. And they also, like I said, decreases the number of people who participate in town events, activities, and also leads in decrease of number of people who volunteer their time to the town. For all these reasons, I believe the town of Nahant should be in non-owner occupied short-term rentals. This would help protect the town's housing stock, reduce noise and traffic, and promote a sense of community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. Very much appreciated.
George.
I thought you said Josh.
I don't know why, but everybody calls.
Oh, wait a minute. You called yourself Josh when you
Call me
called
anything,
to
but
me.
just don't call me late for dinner, I guess, huh?
You got it. Thanks, George. All right, Tony.
I just wanted to speak on this motion to try and help provide some clarity in case there's any questions on this. So the general bylaw that just passed requires that all short-term rentals, whether they're non-owner occupied, owner occupied, or owner adjacent, are going to have to get a license every year from the town. So for those concerns that were just raised, those are going to be considered in the regulations. If a short-term rental host is not abiding by those regulations, they stand to lose their local licensure, right? So either way, there's an annual check at the town level. And I wanted to, on the non-owner occupied for the special permit, what the short-term rental committee recommended when they looked at the difference between owner-occupied and non-owner occupied, they started to list out kind of what are those characteristics that we're concerned about. And they turned those into standards that the ZBA would measure those applications by. So if you are a non-owner occupied host and you're applying for a special permit from the ZBA, they're going to measure your application on a number of different factors. And if you go to page 90 in your FinCom book, it's on the bottom, there's 8 different standards there. And a lot of them speak to the concerns that were just raised. So the short-term rental committee considered what George just brought up. They felt that these standards that the ZBA would measure applications by would cover a lot of those concerns. And then there's the safety net of the general bylaw that just passed that requires an annual renewal with the town. That's all.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion?
Jim Walsh.
And the motion is as amended by George at the moment.
By Josh?
By George.
Oh, I see. So Jim Walsh, 33 High Street. I voted for the first part of this. And I did that because I thought it made sense for the Board of Selectmen to have the opportunity to study and think about and get responses from other citizens about what made sense in terms of short-term housing. However, now that we have an amendment on a specific thing, it creates kind of a problem, because I have a strong opinion on this particular matter, realizing, of course, that others can differ and reasonably differ with me. I understand that. But from the beginning, I thought it made sense to restrict short-term rental housing to owner-occupied units. And the reason for that is, there are many. George laid out many of the potential problems with it. But one of them, I'm not sure that he mentioned, is, I guess he did, taking away units that could be rented to families who want to live in town. If we have a situation where it makes economic sense for a developer or someone who owns a lot of rental property to come in and start buying up smaller homes or units and then deprive them, others, of coming here to live. There would be no place that they could afford to live. So I think the more reasonable approach on this would say, if someone already has non-owner-occupied units, then they're grandfathered. We're not going to affect them. But I would like to see a situation where developers are not encouraged to come into town and buy up small units and deprive families of living there. At the same time, I strongly agree with Carter Smith's opinion that if you're having guests come in from out of town for a birthday or something of that sort, you want them to have a place to live in town, temporarily. So I'm not against the idea of short-term rental housing. I simply do not like the idea of somebody in San Francisco buying up 10 units in Nahant and then having no other connection to our community. So I'm going to vote in favor of this amendment. I wish it had not come up quite this way. And I realize that people can have different opinions, but right now I'm going to vote yes for the amendment.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Brendan Bronk, Olmsted, 2 Summer Street, Nahant. This is maybe a question more for town legal counsel. If this were to pass and it's restricting on the residential zoning, but it's still allowing special permits for the business zoning, does that open the town up to litigation where we are, in a sense, discriminating against, or the difficulty I see is we have very few properties in the business zoning that could be developed or used. Pretty much all the business zoned locations, I think, are occupied currently. There's maybe only 1 or 2 that are vacant. I'm just concerned that it opens up to potential litigation. If this passes, that there be litigation to then roll back the bylaw.
Well, whether there's litigation is an open question. There can always be litigation. Okay, now the likelihood of that being successful, I think, is very small. The statute 64D Section 14 specifically gives us the right to regulate the existence of short-term rentals, which includes where and when they can exist. So this would be an example of where we're saying they cannot exist in this particular circumstance. So there might be litigation, sure there could be, but I doubt there's any real chance of it being successful.
Okay, so there's no concern that if there's really only 1 or 2 actual properties that are zoned for business that would be available, that's not a justification for the court to say no, that the bylaw that was passed was too restrictive, because you've created a law, but pretty much only one person, in a sense, could take it.
Again, I don't see it being a very successful argument. Keep in mind, though, that these, if they're passed, these bylaws will be vetted by the Attorney General's office, who probably address that issue. And then if they do deem it to be illegal, they will strike it down. But I don't see that happening, to be quite frank. And just keep in mind, we're only talking about non-owner occupied. This doesn't apply to owner occupied or owner adjacent, which are untouched at this point. So they can exist anywhere with the regulations. So can there be litigation? There can always be litigation. Is it going to be successful? I doubt it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barber.
Pete Barber, 22 Emerald Road. I think this is a little too restrictive. Yes, we're trying to avoid having, somebody from California buy up a whole tract of land and turn it into a bunch of Airbnbs. Quite personally, the committee went in and put in a 4% cap on the housing stock, so we already have a limit. Giving the selectmen kind of controls to, put in rules and regulations. We already have, earlier somebody mentioned about, quiet time or whatever. We already have some of those bylaws in the system already. The other thing is, I sat on the Zoning Board of Appeals for a number of years. Having folks that don't live here have to go through a special permitting process. This allows you as a neighbor to literally stand up and say, no, I don't want that next door. That's the process, for a special permit. So again, we have some folks in town that may own additional pieces of property and want to have one as a Airbnb and live in the other. Again, I think allowing our selectmen and, you know, putting in zoning regulations allows for us to control it. You know, this is a small town. Yes, we want to keep the fabric of our town the way it is. I don't support this. I think it's too restrictive, and I don't think it's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Paul.
Hi, Paul Spurn, 36 Mayolas Road. With all due respect, I disagree with what you've just said. I'm afraid that as it stands now, allowing non-owner occupied small short-term rentals is an invitation for people to invest in property here, and has the side effect of discouraging less remunerative investment in property that might help us solve our affordable housing problem. Now, as in many things, my wife points out something very important that I overlooked, and that is that the text of the amended motion as it appears in front of us is not correct. The amendment was only to change the designation of R1 and R2 for non-owner occupied, not for all three categories. So that needs to be okay. Having said that, I would like to extend the change in zoning designation to include the owner-adjacent properties in R1 and R2 to to N as well. And I've asked George if he would agree to change his amendment to include that, and he has agreed, but I'm sure you need to hear from him as to whether
I think,
he'll do that.
unfortunately, we need to hear from the folks on the amendment.
I'm not going to tell you how to run the meeting.
You are proposing a second amendment, and this will be the only, you can only have two amendments at any given time. So the first amendment is to change R1 and R2 on page 91 under short-term rental non-owner occupied from SP to N. And as I understand it, your second amendment now suggests that you change under short-term rental owner adjacent R1 and R2 from P to N. Is that what you're doing?
Yes, but I'll wait until the First Amendment is voted.
The First Amendment will be voted on, and
I will withdraw it. I don't want to stand in the way of it.
no, that's all right. We can do it as two amendments, but so the proposal before the House then is to change both non-owner occupied and owner adjacent short-term rental entries for the R1 and R2 districts from what they are now to not allowed. Is there a second for that motion?
I withdrew that.
You withdrew it? Okay, if you withdraw it, then we can go on. Yes, ma'am, sorry.
Yes, okay. Jeannie Baronic, 2 Summer Street, Nahant. This is a legal technical question. What if the house is owned, the owner is a trust? And I'm bringing this up because before Brendan was the owner now of the house, our house had been placed in a trust.
Yeah.
And I've lived in that house for 51 years.
Yes. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. But I raised the question in terms of there may be other people in Nahant that have lived in the house, but the house technically is listed as a trust.
I hate to think of how many houses in Nahant are actually listed as a trust, but we have a lawyer right here, and I'm a patent lawyer, so I'm not going to answer that.
Thank you.
As the language reads, if it's your principal residence, then notwithstanding whether it's trust or not, it would be qualified for an owner-occupied. So it's got to be your principal residence, and that language was specifically added by the committee, keeping in mind folks come and go from Nahant, especially the snowbirds, people like that.
Thank you. Further discussion, sir?
Yeah, my name's Mark Clark. I live down on Furbish Road, and I'm really in support of this. My street's very short. There's 4 houses on my street, and 2 of them are B&Bs. My neighborhood was one of the best neighborhoods in the world to live in. Now it isn't. One of the persons travels a lot, so we don't see him as much, but the 2 B&Bs, every 3 days there's new people in there. You know, before, I could always go to the neighbor if they were having a problem, or if I wanted to borrow a cup of sugar or something, right? And my kids, I have my grandkids with us a lot now. We babysit them. When my kids were growing up, they run around through the bird sanctuary in the neighborhood. The neighbors looked after one another. Now, when I have my grandchildren there, where there's 2 B&Bs, I never know who's in those homes. So I've lost that ability for my neighbors to look after our children. And it's so nice to have people that you can go talk to. When you have people that are in there for 3 days, you have no relationship with them. You don't know if you have a pedophile that's living in there, because they don't have to register in a short period of time, right? We've already had in one of the B&Bs, the police had to come in because there was an attempted, they had to check on the person because he was contemplating suicide. So if you've got a big neighborhood with lots of homes, maybe you can stick 1 in there. But on my street, if you grandfather these 2 in, I've lost my neighborhood. And what it is, I'd love to see owner. You have to have an owner in there, then you can rent out. That would really help. So I want you to think real hard on it. It's changed my neighborhood. I had the best neighborhood in the world. It isn't anymore. It's a business, and that's why the people go into this, is to make money, you know. So that's my say.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. We're still speaking on the amendment which would eradicate non-owner occupied short-term rentals in R1 and R2 districts. Still talking about that amendment. Yes, sir.
Stephen Viviano, 47 Little Nahant Road. Planning board, I've been on for about 7 years. I did have the luxury of serving on the short-term rental committee with some great folks. Little history on me, I've been in town 30 years, 31 years. I went to the Johnson School. I grew up here. Best thing that ever happened to me. I personally am involved with short-term rentals. I didn't prepare to speak today. I didn't prepare anything. I know opinions vary, but it's tough for me as just a resident of the town, as a member of the planning board, to sit back. There's a lot of truth to everything. There's a lot of worry that we should consider, but it's tough to sit back. As I watched this process unroll, being on the short-term rental committee, these have been in town for 12 years, short-term rentals, and we didn't hear much about them. And then I thought I'd get on this committee and we would develop some rules and regulations, and all of a sudden it became cast in a pretty bad light. I'd like to point out the fact I have rentals in Nahant, and a lot of the people would come and they would stay for just the summer months, and then they would leave. And then I would get calls from people saying, do you have a place to put my family member for a wedding, for a holiday, for similar situations? So it kind of metamorphosized and took a toll on its own. I think priority number 1, this is a very small town. We don't have a traffic light. That's usually what I tell people, you know, when I want to give them the relative size of the town. I think community involvement and neighbors' involvement in this is extremely important. I think if this fails, I think if these become burdensome enough, I'd be the first to come up here and say, shut them down. But I think what we're really not considering is we're not creating rental units. They are rental units, and they do collect money, and they do make whoever's on the receiving end of the money. But if it was a long-term apartment, it would be the same thing. You know, one could argue that one is short-term. Of course, there's a big difference between the 2 of them, but they're both generating revenue. And with a short-term rental, the upside I see to it, as any opposing member of any situation, you have the option and you have the position to step in and say, no more, or you can't do this, you can't do that. When long-term rentals, you don't so much. So, you know, I'd like to stand up here and put a face to kind of both sides. I'm definitely with both sides. I served on that committee, not to serve myself. I served in the committee to hear and to learn. But I hope everyone gives it some thought that, you know, there's definitely a lot of downside, and we have to protect it. But also, we might not all be so lucky to have a big enough house that relatives can stay in for a funeral, for a wedding, for a holiday. And you'd be shocked if you saw the guest log of who's actually staying at these places. It's not parties, and if it is parties, someone's soliciting that, and they should be shut down and ended. But for the most part, it's really, it fits Nahant somewhat well. So I wish there was more involvement while I was on either committee. There was a good amount of involvement, but I wish more people got in and said, well, who's staying here? How long are they staying? What are they doing? Because I'm not up here to sell a dream, but there's a lot more good to the everyday of it, and I think a lot of the properties are taken serious. They're upheld beautifully, and that doesn't make them good if they're bothering the neighbors, but I just think there's a little bit more to it, and I hope we can all consider that. Whatever the town votes, however the town feels, that's the way to go, and you know, I stand behind it, but again, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. I can.
Ken Colangelo, 81 Willow Road. Two quick questions here. If, given the amendments that we're talking about here that are essentially banning Airbnbs in these specific areas, if the Attorney General finds what we're potentially voting here as not in conformance with Massachusetts law, because we are effectively trying to ban Airbnbs in the specific context, does that strike down everything up to it, or is it just, did they just say, no, you can't do this, but the rest of it stands? The municipal law unit of the Attorney General's office will splice out the illegal portion if there is one, and they'll cut down that and leave the rest standing. Okay. That is your question? Great, that's one. And my second question was, in making these changes, so non-owner occupied and owner adjacent being gone, if someone owns a house today, if someone has lived in Nahant for 5 generations and decides they want to retire to Florida but keep their house and rent it out, by making this change, that prevents that from being possible, is that correct? Well, no, as a short-term rental, yeah. If that resident moved to Florida, then that house in Nahant no longer is our principal residence. So then they would be then qualified as a non-owner occupied, or would come under the non-owner occupied portion of this bylaw. True. Okay. So it's an annual registration process. So if they moved down last year, maybe last year for 6 months they were here, but now they're not here at all. You're right, that changes a category. Okay, but the primary residence is what drives whether. Absolutely, yeah, and that was by design. That was deliberate. Okay, thank you. That wasn't by accident.
Thank you. Doctor?
DeWitt Brown, 23 Phillips. Call the question, please.
The question's been called for. The vote now is whether or not the question is adequately called for, and we cut off further debate. Those in favor of cutting off further debate signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it by an almost infinite amount. So now we go to the amendment, and the amendment is, as we said, changing the short-term rental, non-owner occupied, in zones R1 and R2 from special permit to N, not permitted. If you're in favor of that amendment, then vote yes. If you're against it, vote no. Is what? I don't know. the final. Okay. So 122 to 53. The question is whether that's a two-thirds vote. I don't think it is. This is amendment to a thing on the floor. Now, this will be a two-thirds vote. Yeah. Okay. I thought, well, every once in a while I'm right. I don't know what happens. So now we are dealing with the motion as amended. Is there further discussion of the motion as amended?
Point of order, Mr. Moderator. It seems to me, even with this amendment having been adopted, it does not take all the guts out of the motion that was originally proposed to amend the zoning bylaw, because in particular, there's two categories in which in the B1 and B2 zones, special permits are still called for. So I suggest that the town still needs to act on the zoning amendment to require a special permit for non-owner occupied short-term rentals in those two zoning districts.
I'm sorry, but the original
You withdrew
motion, the original motion was to pass the zoning bylaw as presented at page 91, 90 or 91 in those pages. And there was an amendment to that to change the sections under R1 and R2 in the case of non-owner occupied short-term rentals. And that amendment has been accepted.
Correct.
Now,
does
the
not affect.
remainder of so now the article as amended is up for discussion and vote.
Fair enough. But even if that gets adopted, there's still residual action that was proposed and called for in the warrant to amend the zoning bylaw to require a special permit in the B1 and B2 zones.
That's still here. That's still in the motion.
Okay, well, we just need to make sure we don't forget about it, because it sounds as if the action, we're going to go forward and adopt the amended provision. So we have to circle back to this provision as it relates to B1 and B2.
It's the same as it was when we left it. It is a special permit under B1 and B2 for non-owner occupied.
Okay, then let me clarify. The provision on which we will be voting is to make R1 and R2 not permitted.
And we already voted on that.
We voted to amend the proposition. We did not vote on the actual provision. So if we now go ahead and vote in favor, the article as amended, it will have the effect that B1 and B2, I'm sorry, R1 and R2 become N, not permitted, and B1 and B2 become special permit.
That's correct.
Okay. So is that now before the House?
The original motion as amended is before the House. That's right.
Okay. Is it open for discussion?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'd just like to propose that the House adopt the amended motion. It may not have a very great effect in town because the number of properties that are affected in the B1 and B2 zone, there may not be any. I don't know if there are. There may be some. But with respect to those, that calls for anybody who's going to have a non-owner occupied, including a non-resident operated short-term rental, to apply for a special permit. And I suggest that that is a good protection for the town. Tony outlined some of the reasons. It means that the ZBA would have to expressly find that permitting that sort of a short-term rental would be in the best interests of the town for the reasons that are set forth on page 90. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Patty.
Patricia Magner, 15 Breezy Hill Terrace. I did some research on B&Bs, and I have lots of friends that own property in Boston. an LLC has to be in good standing to do business, and I know a lot of people did a lot of work over the last 2 years, but they said for a short-term rental, or basically a B&B that's done through the internet, not through a real estate agent, that you have to have 2 LLCs. You have to have 1 LLC there's some properties that are under LLC ownership, but to operate it as an Airbnb, which is really what we're talking about, they'd have to have a second LLC. The thing is, an LLC, it's different from all the people that have trusts. The LLC is to protect you from getting sued. But if your corporate taxes and your corporate status isn't up to date, you're not supposed to have a short-term rental. And I know a lot of these, the work has been done and they've used LLCs. A lot of people that are interested in it have property under an LLC. So I don't know how this group can kind of amend this whole documentation. But the LLC is the same problem as basically this short-term rental is about single residential property that's single ownership. You can have an illegal apartment and get away with it, but it's still an illegal apartment. So a lot of the short-term rental is, somebody's living in the house, they had a basement unit, it might have been a family unit, it might have been their property for a relative. You had to have open egress. I'm speaking as a former assessor, so I have read all of the zoning and whatever. You have to have open means of egress. Now, in the short-term rentals, we have basically, we have situations where there's a rental of an illegal apartment and maybe 2 people can be in the bedroom. We have never pulled anything about the current zoning, which actually prohibits more than 3 people occupying a residential property. There's a provision, obviously, for domestic partners, whatever, that aren't married, whatever. But it's really not supposed to be. Our zoning law has not been amended to kind of say you can have 18 people in a 2,000-foot lot with a 3-story high building with no parking, and then ask your neighbors to risk their life in the winter in a snowstorm because it's being rented for short term and the streets are blocked. Most of you don't remember the storms we've had before, but Army Corps of Engineers has had to dig people out of streets. I have no problem with people renting legal apartments. They want to do it short term if they want to use the technology. But I don't particularly, I'm not a fan of the street parking. We have a nice sign coming into the town. Welcome to Nahant. You're not allowed to park here. And then we're asking the provision to have parking for rentals. So the rental issue and the people that short-term dump their trash in front of other people's houses. So I'm just saying we should make sure that this is exactly what we want when we vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Jim.
Jim Walsh, 33 High Street. I'd like to ask the town council a question, but I'll preface it by saying when I spoke earlier about short-term rental, I wanted to mention Steve Viviano, mainly because I have done business with him. I've had visitors come to Nahant and stay in short-term rentals that he owns, and his impact basically on the town has been good. He's improved properties, he's done some terrific stuff. So I just want to make sure, town council, that if we pass this, Mr. Viviano's properties where he does not live, he would still be able to
Jim,
rent those.
I'm
He'd be-
sorry, we're not going to get legal rulings on anybody's particular properties. This
No,
is
no,
a,
no.
this
Let
is
me-
a
let me-
job for trying to determine what to do with our zoning. It's not to see what the result's going to be on anybody's particular properties. And we aren't going to ask town council for an opinion on that.
Okay, may I ask just one more try at this, Mike?
Sure.
Okay. Would people like Mr. Viviano be grandfathered? Not him, like, who
Jim,
already owns property?
Jim, come on, man, that has nothing to
I
do
thi-
with passing this legislation.
Well, I have to say, I think that's a very reasonable question, whether people would be grandfathered in their own situation now. That's all.
That was asked just as you were leaving. That's what I was discussing with thing, and right now we don't know what the effect of grandfathering would be.
Okay, so we don't know is the answer.
And
Okay.
this is not the time to elicit opinion of
Thank you,
council
sir.
on it. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Susan Solomon, 5 Rundle Road, and I would just like to call the question, please.
Question has been called. The vote now is whether to cut off further debate on the motion as amended. So those in favor of cutting off further debate, vote yes. Those opposed, no. I'm not going to let you shout this time. I loved it the last time, but I have one leak. But no, that's all right. Anybody in favor of it, of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. All right, we're good. We're good. All right, so we cut off debate, and that means that we go to the question as amended. Those in favor, is there anybody who doesn't understand what the amendment was? I think we all know now. So those in favor of the motion as amended signify by voting yes. Those opposed, no. And we do need a two-thirds majority here. (143 to 31). We have succeeded in passing. So now we go to, I think we go to question 25. Motion 25?
I move that the town vote to indefinitely postpone Article 25 because it contradicts or has conflict with Article 24 that we just passed.
Motion seconded by Ms. Tarmy. Further discussion on the motion? Motion has been made to indefinitely postpone. Those in favor of indefinite postponement, vote yes. Those opposed, no. Wait a minute. Oh, okay. As they say in Japan, choto mate kudasai. Wait a minute while she writes the question. There we go. Here we go. We're off in the races. Those in favor of indefinite postponement, 134, one against, 30. The last motion of the day.
I move that the town continue the following standing committees to June 30th, 2024. Community Preservation Committee, Cable TV Advisory Committee, Veterans Memorial Committee, Sailing Committee, Cemetery Advisory Committee, Coast Guard Design and Development Advisory Committee, Town Charter and Committee, Tennis Committee, Town-Owned Land Study Committee, Nahant Alternative Energy Committee, Golf Course Management Advisory Committee, and the Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee. Cultural Council, FEMA Flood Insurance Study Committee, Green Community Committee, MVP Committee, Noise Abatement Committee, Nahant Fire Station Architectural Assessment Committee, and the Short Short-Term Rental Committee.
Further discussion? Okay, this is seconded by Mr. Vanderslice. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, those in favor? Oh, yeah, yes, please. Oh, they got turned off. Did you irritate that fellow up there? I hope not.
Ruthie Merrill, Little Nahant.
Yeah.
Short-term rental committee, do we still need that?
I think it's, yeah, I think the general feeling is they want to, yeah.
Yeah, the idea of renewing the short-term rental committee is that the selectmen are going to be working to develop rules and regulations. So, you know, working with that group who just went through this process will be important to that.
Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, if you're in favor of the motion, say yes. If you're against it, vote no. And while you're voting, I'd like to just tell you a story of how we got here and what kind of work has been involved in it. We have a wonderful FinCom, absolutely wonderful. 35 years, geez, the guy knows what he's doing, I guess. But we have other people on there. So the FinCom is Bob Vanderslice, Peter Barba, Julie Tarmy, Judith Zahora. We had Dana Sheehan also on. Dana had to resign. We have Barbara Beatty. She is unfortunately afflicted with the virus at this point and could not attend today, but she's done a lot of work. She's brilliant. She's very good with the thing. Dan McMacken, Deborah Warren, and Joy Bartlett was just appointed. She's going to be fantastic. So a lot of work has gone down. Everybody at both of these desks has put a tremendous amount of work in order to get us to this point. Thank you. Thank you. The business being conducted, this meeting stands adjourned. Dissolved. Was there a motor who? There was a who?